my fellow readers, it's I, Dark Symphony Simpson, with another fan fiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell for notifications, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts of the story. Let's get started. So, who likes Touhou? I like Touhou. Not really, kind of, sort of. Those of you who don't know, Touhou is a long-running bullet hell. Oddly enough, when I played the original, I was like completely caught off guard by the original being an Arkanoid clone of all things. I was caught off guard. It was fun, but I was caught off guard. I thought that's just me. Created by Zun all the way back in the 90s, still going strong now. But this story is about one character who's part of a group of very, very popular characters that are popular for certain specific reasons, and it's kind of just thrown to the side because everyone seems to forget about her because the rest of the crew just happens to be more popular than her. I'm talking about the one, the only, Meiling. So the story I am reviewing today is Being Meiling. This is actually not a web story on fanfiction.net nor on Archive of Your Own. This is actually a offbeat fanfiction created on a website called TouhouProject.com, which is a forum site, and it is a create your own adventure style. In essence, a create your own adventure story. Like, there's two different types of CYOAs. There's choose your own adventure and create your own adventure. I mean, so Being Meiling kind of falls underneath that second one. I did the difference because I say there's a difference because choose your own adventure basically means you're actually dictating what you specifically want to see. Create your own adventure is basically you dictate what specifically is going to happen as the story is being written. So I gotta think there's always like a difference between the two. And this story, I have never... Okay, calm down. Before I get into the story, I might as well at least talk about who Meiling is. So, Meiling, or Marin, or however you want to pronounce it, is the gatekeeper of the Scarlet Devil Mansion crew, otherwise known as SDM. She first appeared in the 6th game of Touhou, otherwise known as embodiment of Scarlet Devil. She is the gatekeeper of the mansion. She's basically meant to keep people from kind of just storming the mansion, messing stuff up, and being rabble houses, sort of thing. She can't keep Marissa out because Marissa keeps wanting to steal books. Like, aha, I got my books. And Patchouli's like, no, but you, give me books. Give me my books back. Like, no. Why? They're mine. Whee! But besides that, Meiling actually, is able to keep literally everyone out. However, considering the fact that Meiling is the gatekeeper of like a very, very well-known crew. I mean, everyone knows what Touhou 6 is. Like, everyone knows about the Scarlet Devil Mansion crew, besides Meiling, because most of the time the fans portray Meiling as like basically that. And not to mention, she's with Patchouli Knowledge, who's very popular among certain crowds. There's Sakuya Zowie, which is... Honestly, you need no introduction to Sakuya. Just know that she's female Dio. You have Remelia, the original 1,000-year-old vampire lolly. And Flandre is more known for her theme song. No other reason. And also being the original vampire lolly's sister. So that kind of leaves Meiling kind of like on the out looking in, like looking at everyone like, it's like everyone's so popular except for me. And so which is more or less the basis of Being Meiling. It's basically a first person, never thought I'd say this, really good first person story centered around Meiling as she just basically does stuff. There's not really much of a plot with this story. It's mainly just Meiling does something, she kind of gets wrapped up into something, and then it ends, and then something else happens. Like there's really no concurrent plot throughout the entire story, with the exception of her love life, which like I'll talk more about that when I get to Meiling as a character. But in terms of like the actual plot, there's not, like I said, there's not really a thorough, any significant plot threads that kind of thread through the entire story besides the love life of Meiling, with Sakuya and Yuka Kazami kind of chasing after her. It's fine. But I do like this style of story because it's a choose your own event. It's a create your own adventure, so you're probably gonna go for something. I actually, before I get into characters, I do want to mention a fun fact. Create your own event. Choose your CYOAs/audience participation is actually banned on fanfiction.net, and those idiots known as Critics United, they don't particularly like. I mean, honestly, I'm not particularly a big fan of the format of choose your own adventure stories specifically on fanfiction.net because ever since they made it impossible for like links to go onto the page, because now you literally cannot choose stuff like that. It's like really, really annoying to actually do create your own adventures on specifically fanfiction.net. Any other site like Touhou project.com, Fanfiction, even kind of sort of, probably not AR3, but mostly just Fanfiction. Any site that like lets you link to other chapters, I think that's a better use of create your own adventures. But I never understood the rule against audience participation on fanfiction. I just think it's a fun little project for groups of friends to like have some fun and kind of goof off. Not to mention, stories like this really participate creativity, because I think next to novelizations, CYOA stories are among the hardest, because you have to be thinking really fast. You have to be thinking, okay, here's all the directions I want. What would the people choose? And it requires a lot of forward thinking, a lot of planning ahead, and a lot of very much adapting to situation because sometimes people may just do offbeat choices, and that will get super popular. It's like, oh, I gotta do that choice. And I just love the entertainment factor. Like, you can't, like, it helps with creativity. Like, every author, I think, should at least try one create your own adventure story at least once in their writing career. More just a test of their skills to see how smart, how quick on their feet they can plan stuff, and how creative they can get in terms of like kooky ideas that people who are watching can come up with. And that's pretty much what this story is. Like, they have a lot of, like, there's some suggestions that the author's like, let's make something up, and they make something up. It's like, I can work with that. And then he just works with that. And that's what this story is. Well, that's not the main theme of the story. The main theme of the story is, don't judge a book by its cover. So what I mean by that, and I'm gonna use it to segue into the characters, is the simple fact. You have three of the main characters are Meiling, Yuka, and Flandre. And the characters in this story specifically is meant to like sort of subvert what the more common fan perception of them are. So like with Meiling, most fans see her as like a lazy bum who just lets people just constantly come into the Del Manor, and she's like, kind of being lazy and not really doing anything. With Flandre, it's that she's a psychopath who's kind of has the mind of a child and can't really function that well. And with Yuka, she's just a straight psychopath. They just kind of picture that she's a straight psychopath. That one doesn't help, considering the fact I believe in one of the games she kind of casually mentions doing genocide for fun. So, there's that. But the story kind of, specifically for those three, because the other main characters are the rest of the Scarlet Devil Mansion crew, except for Patchouli. Even like Kohaku is like a more relevant character than Patchouli, though Kohaku completely just just more or less kind of just goes in and out. But Sakuya, Remilia, Rimu, and then you have Flandre, Meiling, and Yuka, and then outside of those you have probably the other prominent character would be Cerno, and then everyone else is kind of like secondary characters that kind of go in and out depending on what the thread's talking about. But it's mainly that group. So it's like most of it is Skeldar Manor except for Patchouli and kind of sort of Koakuma, Rimu, Yuka, and Cerno. And those are the main characters. So Remilia, Rimu, Sakuya, Meiling, Yuka, Cerno, and that's it. But let me just. But I'm mainly gonna focus on the main characters. So that'd be Meiling, Sakuya, Yuka, and kind of Cerno, because Cerno does appear like around like half of the story, but she's kind of that weird gray area where she's so important that she is the focus on like certain parts of the story, but then she kind of just once those parts specifically focusing on her are done, then she like but she does have a major part in a certain plot thread that kind of goes through certain parts of the story, but I'll talk about more. Let's talk about Meiling. So instead of the fan-in intake of Meiling, she's very dependable. She's a very down-to-earth girl, very dependable. She's kind of bummed that, like, the story kind of starts out with her wanting to learn how to Damaku, because it is kind of implied that Meiling is just not very good at Damaku, and so because she's more of a kung fu person, like Jun and stuff like that. But she's not very good at the whole spell card system thing. Yeah. And so the story has her, the early parts of the story actually have her, trying to learn how to do better Damaku, thanks to Sakuya giving her like a book saying Damaku for dummies and stuff like that. And so the story actually starts with her, practicing, and then Marissa shows up, wanted to do the whole Marissa thing, wanted to go bother Patchouli and go steal some books, because I'm not stealing them, I'm borrowing them until I die. But your whole goal is to never die. I'm still borrowing them. And then, the first choice is, Marissa's kind of, bragging with the Tango, pointing at Meiling. And so the author basically asked him and said, what do you want Meiling to do? And most of the people's just take her Tango and just kind of hold it above her head. So, Marissa kind of yeah. Which is what Meiling does. It's she's, she's tired of being, the monkey for Marissa, so she basically just takes the hot Tango and just holds it above her head. Ha ha ha. And Marissa's like, wait a minute, I can fly. And then Meiling takes the broom. And then Sakuya comes out, and then Sakuya and Meiling just kind of mess with Marissa by taking her hat, by tossing the Hatenko and the broom. And then Meiling starts taking her hat, and it's like, ha ha ha. And it just basically humiliates her. And it's just a very, 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 and that first thread with just Sakuya, Meiling messing with Marissa and Sakuya joining in, that's very much sets the tone for the entire story, as in a more down-to-earth, more just random slice of life drabbles, short stories that are just interconnected by the fact that the entire story is just told from the perspective of Hong Meiling. And so when it comes to Meiling's character, as we see her develop, there's a big point where she's actually straight, but because of Sakuya and then later Yuka, who Yuka develops a crush on Meiling because Meiling was the very first person to be nice to her. It makes sense in context. Meiling's kind of struggle with her sexuality, kind of. It's mainly established that Meiling is straight, except for these two very specific characters. So she's straight except for these two. And so they kind of make a joke saying they're Meiling sexual. Even Sakuya and Yuka are both straight, but it's we're straight except we want you Meiling. It's what? It's Meiling sexual. Don't question it. okay. Mm-hmm. And so that, that kind of has a lot of fun in how stuff like that works. So, yeah. What this entails is... Okay, so what this entails with Meiling's character is, she's acting like a big sister to Cerno. She's very... Again... Excuse me, I'm hearing, like, stuff out of the corner of my ear, and it's kind of bothering me. She's very dependable. She's very courageous. Like, she's very quirky. Like, she basically kind of bucks the trend of what most people think of when they think of Meiling as, like, a lazy bum who don't really do anything. Like, she's overly dependable. She just... Okay, my mom told me to do something real quick, so back to the story. Meiling is very dependable. She's very kind, very courageous, but she's very quirky in the fact that, she's trying too hard to kind of help everyone, and she's just constantly questioning herself, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And, she's willing to play along to, like, some other insanity. But even then, it's like, when something insane happens that she doesn't have a direct hand in, it's like, what? 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 I'm confused. But yeah, there's a lot. She's just a very well-rounded character that you can't help but love and want to go on adventures with, like, hey! She's like one of those people that you want to have fun with. Hey! I don't know what I was doing with that. I don't know. Let's move on. I have 3 main characters. Sakuya is probably the weakest. Mainly because Sakuya is already very popular among the fan base, and that kind of leads to, and for the most part, most of the fandom mainly just attributes her to, like, Dio. Like, she's basically just Dio without the vampire stuff. Although she works for a vampire. The issue is, that kind of leaves her lacking when it comes to the main theme of don't judge a book by its cover, and the fact that the author doesn't really try to subvert her character, just so that kind of leaves her lacking compared to Meiling and Yuka. And, she's still a well-written character. I still love Sakuya's character. She's very diligent. She's, for the most part, like, very protective of Meiling, mainly because she loves her. And she mainly plays the straight man to Meiling and Yuka whenever they're all together, and like, Yuka and Meiling kind of do the silly stuff, and then Sakuya's just there, like, except at the beginning where, Sakuya just joins in, mainly because it's specifically Marissa that they're messing with, though. Sakuya is kind of like, I'll let it slide. I'll be goofy for a second. And then we have Yuka, who, again, the fandom mainly represents her as being, like, an out-and-out psychopath. But this one, she's the psychopathy is more of a rumor that kind of spread out of control, and she's just really depressed over the simple fact that no one really wants to talk to her, because everyone is just so afraid of her. Like, when Yuka's, like, introduced, I think in the second part of the second little story, Meiling is just planting some flowers. Yuka kind of just wanders behind her. Meiling actually has the power to sense when someone who doesn't live there is actually entering the area. And Yuka just, enters the door. Like, Meiling's like, I sense someone coming in, but they're just wandering. Like, they're not really doing anything. Just looking. They're just standing for the most part. And Yuka's like, hello. And then Meiling, they're like, hello, let me finish this flower. It's like, oh, I like these flowers. Are you... And then they talk, and she's talking flowers. And then Meiling's, like, happy. And then she turns around. She sees it's Yuka. And goes, oh, And then Meiling just gets completely nervous. And then she sees Sakuya walking out. It's like, oh, here comes Sakuya with, like, some tea. And, like, oh, no, she sees Yuka. Please help me, please help me. It's like, no, don't disappear. And Sakuya just clicks on her watch and goes. Like, and then, okay, I'll humor her and leave. And then Meiling just basically, kind of guides Yuka. They kind of talk, but then Yuka kind of senses something's off, and then Meiling just, out of fear, is afraid. and basically inadvertently reveals that I'm still afraid of you. And then kind of Yuka starts crying because, she finally has someone to talk to about flowers. And it's basically just, and Mayleen's like kind of awkwardly standing there like, she's crying, what do I do? And then everyone's like, just give her a hug. And then all the readers are like, give her a hug. Give Yuka a hug. It's like, okay. And then they get a hug, and then Yuka's like, you gave me a hug, yeah. And then out comes the entire Scarlet crew in like armor and battlements, where he's like, we don't care if we die. We're gonna save our gatekeeper because we love her. And then they see Meiling just hugging Yuka, and it's like, this was a waste of time. And then they turn around and leave, except for Sakuya, who just does her watch thing, gets back in her dress, and then just says, okay, you want tea and cookies too? And it's a quirkiness. Like, the way the author made Meiling and Yuka and Sakuya over the course of the story, they play off each other really well. Like Yuka goes from like the fandom portrayal, and then once the veil is open, we see her very vulnerable, and then Meiling starts being nice, and then Yuka just starts acting like a lovesick teenager yokai thing, like she's technically like ancient for a yokai, and just seeing her act like a little shy girl, constantly being nervous, constantly like looking from far away at Meiling's like, and then trying very horribly to try love for the first time. It plays off very significantly compared to, Sakuya and Meiling, who are like kind of more familiar, but they're like, they kind of have like the word, but Sakuya mainly just wants Meiling, and Meiling's like, I'm straight, but like, there's no guys who want me. And then we got Patchouli got game. Oh god. Oh, okay. Moving on from those three, we have Remelia and Rimu. They mainly stay the same. They don't really develop that much. I mean, we get to the point where Remelia kind of basically wants to help Rimu, but she's worried that Rimu is going to interpret her as using her for her status as the Shrine Maiden, which actually Remelia actually does admit at first that she was originally doing that, but then she realized how hurt Rimu is, and it's like, I just want to help her as a friend. And then Rimu and Remelia can kind of hook up, and they kind of get married, and then Flandre keeps harassing him with like one of my favorite running gags in any fan fiction ever. It's like, Remelia, I want you and your wife to have a kid, but we're both women. I'm sure Iron has a medicine for that. Make me an auntie, but we're both women, so I'm pretty sure Iron has a medicine for that. I'm pretty sure she could do that. And then it reaches the best part when there's like, at a point where they're trying to catch a Shimimaru, and so Rimu pretends they planned that one of them got pregnant, and like everyone's kind of happy, except Iron, who's like freaking out, like, how the hell did this happen? They didn't ask me for medicine. Why am I sounding like Funky Frank? Oh. And so she basically storms the manor to basically harass them. It's like, how did you have kids? Why didn't you use my medicine? And it's just pretty play for comedy, and I really loved that running gag. But then we move on to Flandre. Just like Meiling and just like Yuka, when we're first introduced to Flandre, she's basically the fan portrayal, sort of. In the fact, she's not really all there. She's kind of a psycho. She's kind of like a man-child sort of thing. But then it turns out that she doesn't really have mental capacity, because this is probably my one of my two complaints about this, is that we don't really get into Flandre's mindset that much, mainly because the story focuses exclusively on Meiling. So there's a lot of implying going around that the reason why Flange was kind of stayed locked up was more due to the fact that that implied that she was kind of asleep for longer, and so her mental capacity was kind of catching up to her age, and so like I said, it's more implying than anything that that the reason why she in this story specifically the fact that she kind of acted like when we're first introduced her she acts like more like a psychopath is because she's kind of like the same thing with Luna from My Little Pony where she was just on the moon so long and she kind of had to catch up, and that's kind of the same things happen with Flandre. She just has to catch up with the fact that it's it's modern day, and so there's not really people hunting her, not really people hurting her, and so she let her mind kind of catch up with the times, which does happen as the story develops. She does actually become more and more sane. She kind of actually she kind of acts more like a child. Again, she does have those shades of the Phantom portrayal where she's still kind of a man-child, but this is more like an actual little kid having fun and being a troll for the sake of being a troll. Like apparently there's a part late in the story where Sakuya and Meiling are just near the gate and just talking, and then they hear a scream saying, "Oh, well, that must be Remelia," and then they hear another scream. It's like, that must be Rimu, and then they both look at each other and say, "Flandre." And then they kind of notice, like, Rimu and Remelia, no, not Rimu. Remelia is, like, very in lingerie, kind of yelling at Flandre. It's like, why did you wake me up? It's like, and then Flandre is holding, like, I'm guessing the Kama Sutra. It doesn't say the name of the book, but I'm guessing Kama Sutra. It's like, but I want to see you and Rimu do this pose. Like, ah! Like, why? And then she goes, I want you to have kids. I want to be an aunt. It's like, but we already told you. I'm pretty sure Iron has a medicine for that. God. Oh, why is there so much food in Touhou? Why? Iron must make a killing off yokai reproduction. Touhou's solution to the yokai possibly dying thing: make everyone a futa, because there's no guys, there's no yokai guys. Make them all futa. Like we see Flandre, like we have like Meiling becomes like a really really big sister to Flandre. Mainly because Meiling's like Remelia can do her own stuff. She has Sakuya, and then Rimu. I got a little girl. I got a little girl with Mobcat with like crystal ear wings things, and she can just destroy everything. And then let's have her act like the biggest sexual troll ever. And then it gets hilariously inverse when Flandre actually wanders in after Meiling, Sakuya, and Yuka have a menage a trois sort of deal. And then Flandre takes one look at us like, no. It's like, why? You see Rimu and Remelia all the time. It's like, no, it's different. I'm gonna go to my room, grab a magazine, and look at all the sexy boys. Nope, done. It's just, it's that level of like nuanced jokes that I really loved in this story. Not to mention the fact the story really sensual, like that plays with the characters and like yeah, I'll talk more about that. I'll talk more about after I talk with Cerno. Cerno is the final major character. There are other characters that do show up periodically, like Pamil, Mala, the Marshmallow Fairy, that kind of shows up, but she's kind of she's really only plays a part in like 2-3 areas. So not really talking about, so I'll just talk about Cerno. Cerno is Cerno. The author doesn't really do anything unique with Cerno, except giving her a gigantic fucking mech. And they call it Die Cerno. And of course, then she beats up a bunch of Kappas. It's like, now you gotta make machines for my friends. And we got to like one of the funniest parts, like, Meiling, yes? Yukari is threatening me. We must beat her. I got a plan. Okay, what's the plan? You must follow me and we gotta pick up materials. I'm not joking, this actually happens. Just bear with me. So, Cerno and Meiling just gonna go around Junsokyo and they basically just pick up a bunch of woods, they kind of put them together. And then they go to Hakyurago to fight Yukari. Yukari just talks a big game. It's like, oh, you're gonna finally follow me, huh? It's like, I'm gonna fight you. It's like, okay. Draw. And then Cerno's like, we're gonna fight in this thing. And then Yukari just plays along, like, gets on the platform. It's like, okay. And then Cerno quickly gets off it and starts rocking. Starts singing a lullaby and rocking the platform. And then it turns out to be a bed. And since everything is being told from Meiling's perspective, it's like there's no what? And then she hears Cerno doing a lullaby. It's like, that's not gonna work. And then she sees Yukari falling asleep. It's like, why is that working? And then Cerno pulls out some catnip. It's like, Ron, get the catnip. And Ron just acts like cat's like, come in. And then causes her to knock out. And Cerno's, I can't remember that specific part, like how she does with Chen. I think she does like the little laser pointer thing with Chen. I think. I'm not sure. It's like, or either that or Chen just like, I'm good. What is really hilarious how it's told from Meiling's perspective, and she's just completely dumbfounded, like, what? But all in all, this is, it has a great group of characters. The only characters that don't really improve that much is Rimu and Remilia. After a point, they have a small character arc, but for the most part, once that character arc is done, they mainly just stay the same for the most part. And Sakuya doesn't really change that much, mainly because Sakuya's kind of plays a straight man to Yuka and Meiling shenanigans, all that. Still, there are other characters, like I said, there's Mala, the Marshmallow Fairy, who basically we're introduced to when Sakuya and Meiling do the typical bet. It's like, I can do your job better. And they kind of switch, and then Meiling's like, I can do the maid thing very easily. And then behind her, a chair gets set on fire by this Mala. And she's like, ooh, marshmallows. And she's kind of like a running background character, but she kind of becomes important at the end of the story where, she's causing a lot of mayhem. And Mala's used to finish Flandre's character arc. I really like that. And we get to the pacing and the writing style. The writing style is literally focused on Meiling. There are parts where it switches to other characters. It mainly only switches to one part with Sakuya, one part with Yuka, and one part in a flashback with Remilia, and 2 parts with Mala. Mainly to kind of talk more about, go into more depth with her character a little bit more. Mainly because Mala is like a background character for the most part. Why it switches to Mala, I don't know. But I think that leads to the other main fault of the story, where the fact that having it focus so exclusively on Meiling, except for other parts, and Remilia's part is mainly in the flashback, and Sakuya and Yuka's first-person part is mainly them lusting after Meiling because Meiling decided to tease them by wearing spandex. And so she's bending down, shaking her hips, and meanwhile Sakuya and Yuka and then Yukari are watching over the wall with nosebleeds, Meiling butt. And that. The writing is actually very varied. It switches easily from very comedic, the whole point with, let's use the Yukari example. When after Cerno beats Yukari, it's treated as very comedic, but then it gets very serious when Yukari wakes up, realizes she got beaten, and then we kind of learn the truth over the fact that we don't really notice it at first. We notice it afterwards, where Yukari is completely is actually not really that powerful. Yeah, she has control over gaps, but in this story, she used the gaps really burn through a lot of her energy, and so she has to use more her reputation and her way with words to try and manipulate, keep everyone in line without just destroying each other, which is actually revealed in a later part where Meiling actually has to team up with Yukari. they kind of deflate a situation between Kanako and Iron. Iron probably thinking of those food and medicines. Ha! But it does switch. It switches easily between parts of the thread, between super serious, very dramatic, and just very heartfelt. Like when like at the end of the story, where Mala realizes what she did was horrible. Like, okay, this requires context. So Mala is a fairy that's obsessed with wanting to cook marshmallows. Like, we're introduced to her when Meiling, Sakuya, again, are switch jobs. However, we realize that certain fairies are different, or have certain elements. So like light fairies, fire fairies, stuff like that. Mala is an abnormal fairy where she's specifically a forest fire, and the fairies in this, and quite frankly, in canon, fairies are like dumbasses in general. They don't really know how to do much stuff. But so like, you know, some of them control elements, but Mala is like an abnormal one because she has to follow her impulses, where she basically has to burn stuff in order to give new life. So she destroys the old life to give new life. And so she actually starts talking to Kikuya Haruse. I completely butchered that. And she finds about a cloak that basically can amplify powers. And so basically what happens is she puts it on and she actually gets set on fire, but it doesn't realize the pain. She's kind of in some pain, but she's fulfilling her instinct to want to set everything on fire, because in her mind, she can set everything on fire and to give people the love of marshmallows. And it's actually a very psychologically harrowing moment. I think the execution with Malo is very well done, where the parts with her specifically are very psychological. Like when Meiling, there's an earlier part where Dicerno basically has to save a fire because Mala set the whole thing on fire because she just wanted the world's marshmallows. And then when Meiling goes to basically see her and kind of pick her up, she noticed that everything is just completely like in absolute order because how fairies work. All the trees are planted in the same row, all spaces, they have rocks around them, but they're all in the same formation. And then when Meiling meets Mala, she's like acting like a robot because the fairies are just completely unable to act like, in any sort of order. So it completely broke her, and it was actually played scarily straight. Even the fact that Meiling was completely, even like watching it, was like she was completely creeped out, or the fact that like fairies don't. Sorry about that. Fairies are just completely unable to act like that, and then that plays a part in the climax of Mala's story and Landre's arc, where Meiling goes to confront Mala. Mala is actually mostly a skeleton at this point because the robe that she put on completely destroyed her body, and the only reason why she's alive is because she still has that cloak on. And so Mala completely lost it. Like, she wants to burn everyone and everything down to basically let them light themselves on fire and let them eat marshmallows all over again. And so Meiling completely realizes the only way to shock her in is basically just hit her. Well, basically try to get yourself together slap. Meiling realizes that's kind of a dumb move, and then realizes the only way, and then pretends to die when Mala throws a fireball, hits a fire, and then tosses her hat, and then she hides behind a rock. Mala completely breaks because she realized the ramifications of what she did, and then, Meiling gets her to take off the cloak, and then she kind of hands it to Meiling, and then Mala starts disintegrating, and she realizes what she did was completely horrible, and it's all played very scarily compared to everything else, where everything is like, most of the part is light and fluffy and very, very comedic. The whole part with Mala is complete opposite, and it's such a well-crafted way of switching genres, switching tones in a way that doesn't seem forced and feels needed to complete certain characters. So Meiling goes back home because the fairies actually reintegrate themselves and basically revive themselves. And Mala completely shuts everyone out because she realizes that what she did was completely horrible. And no one can get through with her. And then Flandre shows up, basically, puts a hand on her, on Mala, and basically said, I was like you once. And it stops becoming very scary and it starts becoming very emotional as Flandre goes through her entire character arc to Mala and realizing that you can get better. You're gonna get better. Just like I got better. And you have friends and family who support you and are willing to help you out. And it was very touching. And if it wasn't for the fact that I read this part while at work, I actually would have actually started crying. Because I thought this part was really emotional. And it was just very, very touching and a very fitting way to complete Flandre's story arc. Just telling her experience to another character who was kind of going through the same route. So Flandre is kind of like acting as the teacher. It was very touching. And then we get afterwards we get a very kooky scene of something with the Wakasushi sisters. And it's a very juxtaposition in terms of each area, each little story have their own tones, and the tones completely switch in and out, but in no way it's forced. And I honestly think that whole part would have been better if instead of still focusing on Meiling, because at that point in time, it was when Flandre was comforting Mala, it was still focusing on Meiling. I think it would have been better if it switched from Meiling to Flandre's perspective, so that way we got a more detail on her mindset going into wanting to comfort Mala. That's just me. I think there are points in the story where it didn't need to focus on Meiling. It could have just focused on someone else. The whole point with switching into Sakuya and Yuka was mostly just so they can leer at Meiling, and the whole thing with Hikari was mainly Meiling didn't really have much to do with that specific story, so it's just mainly Sakuya, Yuka kicking Hikari and just getting rid of her. There is also something to say about the tone. Sometimes the tone when it comes to the comedy, it gets very sensual at times. Very heavily sensual. A lot. There are points where I'm literally convinced, is he gonna write a sex scene? Is he gonna write erotica? I don't know, because there's running gag where Meiling are leering at Yuka and Sakuya, and then vice versa. There's a part where they kind of think Rimu and Rumili are having sex, and then Sakuya and Meiling have to keep Flandre out, Flandre and Kawakuma out because they're horn dogs. It's aha, I want to be an aunt. It's no, they can't have kids. It's I can go to Irons and get some medicine. And it turns out Remilia is giving Rimu foot massages, but Remilia is giving massages so good that she's actually drawing Rimu to orgasm. I was completely kind of shocked that the author didn't write a erotica scene, especially in the considering the fact they kind of especially the part where they solidify the relationship as being Sakuya, Yuka, and Meiling, they're just gonna go at each other and just have a threesome. And I'm just okay, if there's any part for any sort of sex scene, it would have been right here. And then it just skips to them, the aftermath, and then Flandre wondering, and it's nope. And wait, it's skipped to after, wouldn't it made, I don't think there should have been too much sex. I just think if there's any part with how much work the author went into with Sakuya, Yuka, and Meiling's characters, and their respective arcs of falling in love with each other, Meiling kind of discovering that, she actually loves them because constantly trying to convince herself that she's straight. There should have been a sex scene there. Okay, it's fine if you didn't, but I'm just confused over why you didn't do it. But yeah, that's it. And the writing, like I said, the writing should have just been, could have I'm happy that the story did focus on Meiling because I think Meiling is a very underutilized character. And a story focusing mostly on her, but I think at times she kind of felt more like a secondary character in certain parts. It's my thing. So, would I recommend... Oh, grammar errors. I didn't see any grammar errors. Would I recommend this story? Unless you're prudent or not, and is not a fan of the sexual humor this story does. Like, most of the humor is sexual in nature. How do I describe how phenomenal this story is? The only way I can describe it is by telling you about the tiers. So, those you don't know, I do have various tiers of where I put each story. So, like, the bottom tier is, like, it's bad, and then it goes okay, mediocre, good, great, good, great, amazing, and then at the top tier is the better off alone tier. I have so much trouble literally reading first person because I have to actually constantly read certain parts multiple times because my mind just cannot truly connect with first person because because how I read is I read everything like a movie, and having it in first person just completely makes it difficult for me to do that. And so when I read a first person, it's just something doesn't connect right. And so I can't fully picture the scenes going on in my head as movie scenes. And it's a very weird... It's the same reason why I don't read manga that much, because it's the same disconnect. But Meiling did something I never thought would be possible. And the fact, not only did it make a first-person story that is incredibly palpable and very, very charismatic, very fun to read. That's ultimately what the story is. It's just a fun read. It told the story it wanted to do. It gave us great, phenomenal characters that are easy to understand. And at the same time, they're very simple on the surface, but have a deep, complex care to them. And they have a lot of love and depth put into each character. It's not even just the main characters, even like the more secondary characters like Yukari and Marissa and Mima and Mala. They're all told in a very complex story that on the surface just comes off as like a random slice of life story that just about the gatekeeper of the Scarlet Devil Manor. It kind of speaks to the author, Keymaster, themselves, that the story is very emotional, can segue very quickly through various genres. Like, this story has a lot of genres attached to it: comedy, drama, horror, romance, and I guess drama. Did I say drama? I don't know. And keep it all coherent, but also very focused on what it's trying to accomplish. And all in a first-person writing that for the first time ever reading a first-person story since maybe Hercules and the Modern Girl, and I had trouble reading that story. didn't really feel like I was reading a first-person story. And so this story I give the highest remarks. I never thought I would ever see the day where I would put a first-person story in the Better Off Alone tier. But this story was done with such panache and very keen attention to detail. And this was a create your own adventure story. This was not even him fully writing it. It was him saying, here's what do you want me to do here? And all the readers just giving ideas. It's like, I'm going to work with this. This story gives so much for what it's trying to tell. And this story deserves every single bit of praise that I'm giving it. There's, like I said, the only real problem is certain parts just simply should have just been focused, do first person on certain other characters. It wouldn't have been that many, just a couple. But there's nothing wrong with the characters, nothing wrong with the plot. Everything is on such a high level that not putting it in Better Off Alone tier would just slap and just be slapping the face of the author. That's just the fact that this happened like this just completely spectacular. So I'm gonna give clap to the author Keymaster. You did something I literally never thought was possible, and that deserves more praise than even saying anything. The fact that you got me to genuinely fall in love with a first-person story to this level is just nothing short of what I would call a miracle, because of how much trouble I have reading these type of stories. And honestly, this makes me want to read the other two stories, because he has two other stories, like a side story and then a sequel following Aya, because I didn't want to talk about Aya's story, but once you actually read the story and you actually start reading about Aya, you'll kind of understand why I didn't want to talk about Aya's role in being Meiling. But this story deserves every bit of plaudits ever. Like, it's just kind of sad to say that my favorite part has nothing to do with Meiling, has everything to do with Cirno. Why? What's my favorite Cirno part in the story? Simple. It's near the end of the story. And so Cirno basically goes to Meiling. It's like, the machines that the couple were building after I beat the living daylights of them are almost finished. I want you to see them. And she basically drags Meiling to the hangar. Cirno is with like the rest of Team 9, which are like a bunch of other fairies. I think Mystia, Dayuse, Rumia, and Wriggle. Fucking Wriggle. And they have all these mechs, and they're doing like they're trying to do team poses and stuff. Like, it's all cheesy, and then all of a sudden it's like, we're gonna test for them now. It's like, why? Because I've heard reports that someone's gonna raid your mansion, and they mean it was like, we gotta get back, and then they kind of go back. Meiling is like standing kind of earnestly by, just watching everywhere, like with Cirno and her friends in the robots, just watching, like, and they're all getting bored. It's like, Cirno, yes, you said we were gonna get robbed. The mansion was gonna get attacked. Like, yes, we're not getting attacked. Like, we will be once the cowards stop hiding behind that tree. And then of course, it turns out to be Mima from the PC. It's like, haha, I returned to try to steal your books. And then she drags Marissa, and it's like, and And then Marissa's wife, Camille. Oh yeah! To get Marissa away from the Scarlet Devil Manor, they got Marissa fake married to one of the fairy maids called Camille, and like Camille's like, wife! And Marissa's like, oh. But then Marissa kind of just warms up to Camille. And then they get like 2 other characters, I think like Lily Black and the spider chick from Subterranean Animism. Cannot remember her name. And then they just basically like, we're just gonna fight you. And I'm literally laughing through that entire sequence. I'm like, this is so cheesy and so over the top and so full of satire because it's literally just Super Robot Wars, just with fairies. And Marissa. And Mima. And then Meiling's like, huh. Sakuya, you guys come see this. And then and then Sakuya basically looks outside. It's like, what do you want? It's like, I want everyone to see this. Like, okay. And then just does the time thing and brings everyone outside. And then Rimu's like, me and Rimu we're doing Snuggies. It's like, what's going on? It's like, we're about to watch 2 groups of idiots fight. Okay, or who wants to take bets? and then they basically start fighting each other. It's like, And then Meiling manages to find out something. It's like, Camille's just being, it's 5 against 6. It's like, how do you know? Their little fairy is just being cheerleaders. Like, I know this sort of thing. I remember it from somewhere. Quick, Yuka, Sakuya, get me materials. And of course, what happens is Meiling puts like on a really cheesy dragon mask, and when Camille inevitably tries to get herself involved, like haha, Meiling just basically hits her in the stomach and tastes the wine. It's like haha, and then Mima and Marissa is like, that's just Meiling. It's like, no, I'm the dragon lady. And then Cerno and the rest of the Scarlet Devil Manor just play along. It's like, it's the dragon lady. Well, Cerno doesn't play along because Cerno is an idiot. But the Scarlet Devil Manor crew just plays along and say, yeah, that's the dragon lady. Yeah. Dragon lady. And then Meiling just gives them encouragement. It's like, you must team up. And it's like, haha. And then Meiling beats up Lily Black. And it's like, it's not done yet. It's like, we're not done yet. It's like, whoa. And then Mima, it's like a complete parody of Power Rangers. I kid you not. It's a parody of Power Rangers or Super Sentai. Mima basically, manifests these claws, and then she basically like has all her people kind of like turn into like a little body thing, like with Marissa on one arm and Lily Black on the other, and like the other 2 characters are like holding them up, like haha. And then Camille gets on top of her head. He's like, haha, I'm in charge. And then Mima's like, no, you're not. And she's like, and Camille goes like, I'm the head. And like the rest of the body agrees with her. Like, yeah, she's the head. She's in charge. Like, fine. And then they see them combine. It's like, we must. And then Circle's like, we must combine too. And I'm literally laughing. And then they all combine into like a big room. And then Camille leaves her body. It's like, I'm gonna start beating you up, okay? And then she swings, and then Lily Black is like, no, don't swing me! Don't swing me! Oh, and then hits the Cernobot in the head, and then starts beating the crap out of him. It's like, and then like the Scarlet Devil Manor crew is like, why aren't you not doing anything? And then we get to the best part. They designed the robots that when they combined, the cockpits itself combined as well. So it's like, they're all kind of like bunched up and like twisted into shapes, and they can't reach the controls. It's like, we can't reach the controls. All the while, Camille is just slapping Lily Black across the face, like, ha 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 ha. And then she notices Lily Black is like completely knocked out, like, eh. It's like, and then she winds up Marissa's like, no, don't swing me too. Let's combine our power. And of course, it ends with a classic beam struggle, with like Meiling getting on top of the Cernobot, and then putting her chi power into it and just completely launching the baddies away. It's completely hilarious. Like I'm even not doing this whole part justice. It's completely over the top. It's ridiculous. And then Cerno goes home. Meiling takes off the mask. And Yuka and all three, they kind of talk to each other. And then Meiling's like, yes, but about that charming, charismatic masked figure. Yes. And it's completely hilarious. So that actually leads into what I would do with this story. This story has a lot of potential for recursive fanfiction, like Shadow Chaser, like fanfiction about a fanfiction. First idea. Just someone should write a story just talking about Dystar and our crew. Like just go full on parody. Like do Power Rangers, do all the Super Sentai stuff. Just with Cerno her crew being idiots and they're stopping evil. Just make it like 23 chapters. Each chapter is an episode, and they kind of just get into shenanigans. Like haha, we're gonna beat up the bad guys. Like you had like this like more and more characters were introduced over the course after this story ended. Like you can do an episode where they fight the Yorigami sisters. Like Joan just wants to do a quick scheme, but it's like very evil, and so Cerno gets into Dysarno and they just beat, and they kind of go at it. It's like haha. Maybe have a story where Flandre wants to actually join him too. It's like haha. It's like you're a vampire. You can't really stay in the sunlight to be a hero. Oh. You could even do an episode where they go against the old maid crew of like Byakuren, Yukari, Yuka, Yuyuko, and Yukari, Yuka, Byakuren, and Aelren. And maybe Kanako just basically just like, what am I watching? What am I looking at? And then Suwako joins in and is like, can I be part of the Team 9? It's like, you do realize Team 9 means stupid. Still let me be Team 9. Only if Kanako can join the old makers. Like, we're not the old maker! There's so much stuff you could just do with Dysarno. Another thing would be probably just write a little short story just having the sex scene. I know this is kind of a nagging point, but I do think that there should have been a sex scene between the three, between Yuka, Sakuya, and Meiling. I honestly think, it's fine. Maybe do a sec, like, there's a character named Big Papa who's basically like an only pimp who does marriage stuff, so maybe you could do something involving him and Flandre. He even said, it's like, how about Big Papa and Flandre, matchmakers? Like, you can even do like a little joke, like some of the more popular pairings. It's like, Racing, I'm gonna pair you up with someone. It's like, it's like, no. It's like, this is Junko. She scares me. You see the lady who tried to blow up the moon? I said, yes, rabbit. Now give me those ears. What about my ears? Like, my ears. Or even do like a joke thing like Misty and Yuyuko. Like, chicken. You could just do a comedy. Or you can, another neat idea for a side story would actually be about Mala. Like, go into, like, I actually very curious about what went through her mind leading up to her snapping, kind of creating a situation where Meiling goes to grab her and she sets up all the trees and the rocks and everything's like uniform. I would love a side story where it kind of goes more into Mala's character, especially during that time where she's stopped by Dysarno and she just snaps. I would love to see that. But mainly, I just want to see the adventures of Dysarno and Team 9. Like, there's nothing you can do with Meiling anymore. You have Cerno. You pretty much already have a basis of the story with Dysarno and her crew. Just go wild. Just go. Just do anything with it. Just as long as it's over the top, making fun of it. Make them pose like the Ginyu Force. Give them the Takusei. Give them the Ginyu Force theme song for all intents and purposes. Just go wild. Just go goddamn wild with that. But yeah, that's what I would change. I wouldn't change anything about the story except just adding different perspectives and different characters. Oh, And also, I would honestly think a third-person version of Being Meiling should be written. Like, this story is good, like, but you would have more flexibility with the third person because you'll be able to go through various characters. Like you can go through Melia and Meiling, Sakuya, Yuka. You can just go through all those characters and kind of have more fun, and you can probably do more in-depth stuff with some of the backgrounds that's happening. Like with Daiserno, you can have her a new chapter just dedicated to her stopping Seija from harassing Mystia. Like you can do like a little side story, like a little side chapter with that. And she's using the Napoleon hammer to beat up Seija. It's like you can do a lot of stuff. And also, but if you do it third person, it would have to be a very hard M-rated story, because if you do it third person, then you pretty much have to do there's pretty much going to have to be nudity, and there's more likely going to have to be multiple sex scenes, not only the sex scene between Sakuya, Meiling, and Yuka, but probably sex scene between Ermilia and Rimu. But most of it would probably just be nudity. Like, mostly nudity, because there's a lot of like, the story already goes very hard in, like, central stuff, like, if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing, but I'm just saying. But that is my fan fiction of Being Meiling. I love this story. I honestly think this is an amazing story. And if not for the fact that starting this year, I'm not going to be counting any story in the Better Off Alone tier for the top 10 fan fictions, mainly because I honestly started to think that's kind of like a very obvious cop-out, because not to mention the top 10s are usually like my personal favorite stories. It doesn't mean that they're the best. They're just my personal favorites. And it'd just be very obvious because, it's just... Better Off Alone Better Off Alone tier would just be too obvious for the number one pick. And even then, as it stands right now, it would pretty much just be a toss-up between Darkness Arises, Redux, and this fan fiction for number one and number two. And I want to give the other stories some more spotlight. So spoiler alert, the top 10s, I'm just basically going to disqualify Being Better Off Alone tier stories, because it's too obvious, and I want to give more shine to other fan fictions. But I would count those as more like tier 0, sorry. Like, here's number 1, and then here's number 0, all the Better Off Alone tiers. But, yeah, that's Being Meiling. Like I said, I love what the story done with Meiling, and focusing on her, and focusing on all the shenanigans that happen. I can't wait to read the other two stories. And this has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.